Today, I wanted to talk to you about choosing intentional connection over reflexive retreat. This is a big one for a narcissist because it can really make a big difference in your life and your relationships. Before we dive in, make sure you subscribe, give a thumbs up, drop some comments below. How does this strike you? What works for you? What's not? What's a challenge? I love interacting with you guys in the comments. And if you got a different idea that works for you, great, because I love learning from you guys too. Okay, so for a long time, I thought that just trying harder, putting more effort in, was going to fix things. And the truth is that it didn't. And in actuality, it just made me feel more disconnected. So this is talking about certainly prior to becoming aware of my narcissism, which was the majority of my life until the last couple of years, really. And even at the beginning of the process of waking up to the narcissism, this was still at play, though now it's at play much less in terms of trying harder. And this can be a big issue. And I imagine a lot of you can relate, because when you don't know that that's what you have going on, or you don't know sort of the comprehensiveness of the narcissism and how it affects every aspect of your interactions with people in your relationships, you get a lot of feedback. And I'll speak for me. I have gotten a lot of feedback over the years that there's something not quite right in terms of like my responses to people, my relationality, how much I express care, whether I care or not, and all these kind of things. And throughout my life, when I would get those types of feedback, I was just like, oh man, yeah, I suck at that. All right, I got to try harder. And that's what I would even tell people, gosh, I hear that I didn't reach out to you for 2 weeks, and so that made you feel like I didn't care. I do care. And then mental note, okay, just got to try harder, put some alerts in my phone, write some notes down. But the thing is that when you don't know and you're not aware and awake to the underlying baseline equations at work in yourself. So for me, one of those in this arena was that, if I get closer to people and show them that I care, or try to do that, they're going to find out there's something wrong with me and that I'm unlovable. Also, I had no idea that my brain worked differently in terms of these things. I thought that the fact that I didn't think about people when I wasn't around them frequently, but then when I was around them, I was happy to be around them and cared and all that stuff. But then they'd be gone out of my space, and out of sight, out of mind. That's a big one for narcissists. I would think that, yeah, if I just tried harder, like there was just something wrong with me. I was just bad at it, and it was just a matter of mental discipline and effort. And the truth is that no amount of mental discipline and effort is going to get you there, is going to help you make that change until you really understand what's going on underneath. And once you understand what's going on underneath, the differences in the way your brain works, the differences in the way you experience and show care, then you can actually start crafting your life in a way that can work for you, for whatever you want. I would suggest that it's likely that no matter where you are on the NPD scale, you do want better relationships, whatever those look like. Now, I know I've gotten some comments from some of you guys that like, you're better off just being alone. I totally get that feeling. There are times when I feel that way myself, certainly in the past a lot, even now though. And still, now I know that I want better relationships that work better. Not that like I have to stuff myself, round peg into a square hole, but that the true me can be authentically present in those relationships and not feel like I have to try harder to connect. So what would happen in the past is that when those situations would arise, I would think I'd have to try harder, but what I would end up doing is reflexively retreating. And whether that was in the conversation, just shutting down, most commonly that shutting down was going into a mental gymnastics of how do I respond in a way that this person's going to be okay with what I say, a whole external referral or inauthenticity performance, putting on a mask, or wanting to be around that person less and less and less. Even if I really like them and like the relationship, that threat of what I was saying earlier about the connection causing them to figure it out and all that stuff was so strong that reflexively would cause me to back away from the relationship. What I've learned is that if I prepare myself, if I set an intention ahead of time, now generally I have this set for all my closer relationships, and then I have to think it through with each one, my kids, my friends, etc. And you can set yourself up to have this intentional connection. And I've shared some of this before, but these are things like if somebody's sharing something, meaningful and emotional to them, you start getting that reflexive panic, which is what would happen for me. What I can do instead, I can intervene and say something like, hey, instead of pretending that I'm feeling deeply moved, because I can see this is something that's really important to you. Now I'll say something like, wow, that sounds tough, or that sounds like this is really important to you, or that sounds like, because I can figure that out. We all can, whether you have empathy or not. Like when other people are emoting, what's going on with them to some degree, enough to make a general statement, like, wow, that sounds tough, or that sounds hard, or I can tell that's really important to you or meaningful to you. Help me understand it, because I don't naturally understand that. That's a powerful one because it displays that you have interest. You just don't know where to land that interest. And if they can be open to working with you, these are people that would be closer who know about the NPD, then they're going to be more likely to say, oh yeah, okay, well this is, imagine this, or maybe give an analogy that helps me put myself in their shoes. And so generally what I do in these situations, ideally a little beforehand, but really that's hard to do. Really, you have to do it in the moment for you to get it, but also for the other person to get it. Because if I just walked up to everybody and was like, hey, my brain works differently, I don't show care the same, so just know that from now on, okay, check the box. That doesn't work. It takes repetition, it takes time, because our brains work in such a different way. It's hard, what I've discovered, is really hard for normies to get that. Now, in an isolated experience, it's not necessarily that hard for them to get, but to keep that in mind as they interact, because I look normal, I look like a person, right? I look like, normal-ish, right? And I speak, fine English, and I know how to say all the words, and I've done a whole lifetime of faking it. So it's hard to remember a lot of times. It reminds me, actually, strangely enough, of people who are in chronic pain. I don't know if you've had experience with them, but one thing about chronic pain, and I'm a chiropractor, so I work with a lot of people who have pain, is that it puts a lot of strain on the close relationships, typically like the spouse relationships or romantic ones and so forth, because the person who's in chronic pain, they're constantly in pain. That's what makes it chronic pain. But there's nothing obvious. They're not bleeding. They don't have like casts on that you can see, anything like that. So for the other person who's not in the chronic pain, but who's around them, it's not easy or simple to remember always the pain that the other person is feeling and how that affects them. Similarly, I imagine for normies who are around me, it's hard to remember on an ongoing regular basis, oh, that's Brad, his brain works differently, and so forth. Like it might be obvious when things get heightened or when I point it out, but I can't expect them to remember that all the time. So I have to just gently remind people when it's relevant. So the most important part for me as the narcissist is to intervene in the reflexive response, to set the intentions ahead of time that I want these intentional connections, and to be willing to be honest in the moment when the panic arises, to just say, hey, however it works. Some people I'm like, hey, I'm having one of those things. I don't have a response. All I can do is think about what I think you want me to say here. And I know that's not what you want. So let me just take a breath, figure out how to respond in a way. Or we got to return to this later. Or, hey, I can see that's important to you. This is a big deal. I'm not seeing it because my brain just works differently. Can you help me see it? Let's work on that so we can really be on the same page. Things like that. So it's never about being perfect, because I don't know if, someday I'll just be able to respond without any of that stuff, that I'll grow my empathy muscle enough that I'll be able to be like a normie in that way. I don't know. But what I do know is that if I'm consistent and reliable in terms of being authentic about what's really happening, that then people can, who I'm in a relationship, can have a foundation to build that relationship on together. And, they might decide they don't want that. There's certainly people out there who, as they've learned about my differences, as I've become more authentic about it, that aren't as interested in having close relationships. And you don't have to do anything, but I would recommend for you, the NPDers out there, that you make it that okay in yourself, because you can't force people to like you if they don't. You can't force them to want to have a relationship with you as you're growing, changing, and evolving if they don't. Better to find people who are interested in that and be around them, because that's when you can really grow together. All right. Intentional connection is about honesty. It's about consistency. It's about choosing to show up even when it's hard. All right. Hopefully this was helpful. Remember to subscribe, leave some comments, some thumbs up. What's working? How's this work for you? Does it seem doable? Give it a try. Tell me how that works. I love interacting in the comments, and I'll see you next time.